Welcome back to Josh Bearhart's Reading Room. I'm Josh Bearhart Hawk, author of The Journal, GPS Signal Lost, and Legends and Tales, creepy and fun stories to tell around the campfire. Today we are continuing our reading of The Journal. We are on to chapter 17. A lot of stuff's happened. If you're just now joining us, if this is the first chapter you clicked on, put a playlist up here. You can go back and you can start with chapter 1 and get through the whole thing because there's a lot of stuff that's happened to get us to this point. There's only a few chapters left. We're getting into the real climax of the book, and we're going to be going through chapter 17 of 23. So a few more, not that much to go. So today, chapter 17 is titled The Asphodel Meadows. Hermes Cantrell had been working since he was a 13-year-old man for Mr. Mark Appleton. He mostly performed housework, cooking, cleaning, laundry, and the odd bit of handiwork here and there. This was his burden. Like his father before him, Hermes was loyal to one master and only one master. He could come and go as he pleased, having the freedom to terminate his employment at any time, yet he chose to stay. Mr. Appleton was a gracious man who had taken him in as a young boy and given him shelter and food. Over time, Hermes took on more and more responsibility around the house and often had the final say on any changes to the large manor that sat in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. He was born on a former plantation in Georgia, his father and mother being former slaves who had taken what work they could get following emancipation. Life had been hard for them, and they wanted more for their son, sending him north as a young boy to live with relatives in Cleveland. After only a few months of beatings, he was desperate to get out of there. Sneaking out of the house in the dead of night, Hermes made his way to the market district, hoping to borrow some supplies and strike out on his own. As far as he was concerned, no one in the world wanted him, and he was just fine with that. As he was attempting to break into a general store, he was apprehended by a couple of Cleveland police officers, who were going to haul him off to the children's home, until a man in a fancy coat stopped them. He spoke quietly and offered them money for the boy. Taking the bribe, the officers disappeared into the night, and Hermes found himself in the carriage of Mr. Mark Appleton. "What were you trying to do tonight, young man?" Mr. Appleton asked. "I need some things. I'm going on the road. Going to be one of them traveling circus folks," Hermes said, staring out into the night. "Oh, joining the circus sounds delightful. Have you come up with a stage name?" Mr. Appleton seemed more amused than the boy expected. "A stage name?" Hermes asked, his eyes turning to the man. "Why, yes, every circus performer needs a stage name. It's a fake name that you use to hide who you really are. If you're running away to join the circus, you must be trying to hide from something." "No one wants me, mister. No reason to hide. I just want to go somewhere where I'll be accepted and where folks won't send me away," he said, a slight tremble in his voice. "Well, now, it can't be all that bad," Mr. Appleton said, pulling out a handkerchief and giving it to the boy. "I'll tell you what. Why don't you come with me? I have a nice big house just to the south, and I could use someone like you to help me look after it." "Really? You mean like come work for you?" His eyes lit up, and he sat up straight. "Yes, I'll give you room and board, and in exchange, you clean the house. I'll even pay you extra for other jobs around the place. What do you say?" And with that, Hermes started his new life. It wouldn't be long before he was handling most things on his own. And, over the next 50 years, he would become Mr. Appleton's most trusted assistant and confidant. One evening, in late 1934, Mr. Appleton would call Hermes to his bedside, handing him 2 envelopes. He asked Hermes to bury one of them in a grave in Fredericktown. The other one held a letter addressed to Hermes, laying out Mr. Appleton's funeral plans and asking him to keep the house until a man named Heath Borgiers arrived. That night, Mark Appleton would pass away. Hermes took possession of the house that sat on the land known as Asphodel Estates. Over the next 30 years, he tended to the house and garden and waited for the arrival of Mr. Borgiers. In September of 1964, he was sitting in his favorite chair in the great room, enjoying the warm hearth, when a long-awaited knock brought him to his feet. Going to the door, he opened it and greeted the very shocked man and woman. Samantha and Heath sat alone in the parlor of the large house. surrounded by ornate decorations and trophies from all over the world. The old man had introduced himself as Hermes, the caretaker of the residence, before leading them inside and offering tea. Promising to return shortly, the odd man left for the kitchen, leaving the curious couple to examine the room. "Well, the owner certainly has a flair for the exotic," Samantha said after a few moments, as she looked around at the animal heads and taxidermied lions, tigers, and fish. "Yeah, he's apparently well-traveled, or he just buys things to make him look that way. I've been in plenty of clients' homes where they never went more than a few miles from home, but wanted it to look as if they had been all over the world," Heath said. "I do believe he is a well-traveled man. You are the owner, after all." The old man had returned with a tray holding 3 teacups and a pot of steaming liquid. "What? No, I'm just here to follow up on a lead in a case," Heath began. "Of the missing Miss Persephone, correct? I assure you, Persephone is quite all right, and you would do well to steer away of that one. Nothing but trouble there. My former master, may he rest in peace, knew her mother, Demeter, quite well. She was a wild one back in the day, too," Hermes said, as he placed the tray on a coffee table and poured each of them a cup. "Who exactly was your master? How do you know about our case?" Samantha spoke up with a slight quiver in her voice as she accepted the cup from Hermes. "My apologies. I thought you would have known, coming all the way out here and whatnot. I was employed by Mr. Mark Appleton for 50 years, until his passing. Before he left this plane, he requested that I continue upkeep on the residence until its new owner arrived. You see, in his final will, he bequeathed this house and the land on which it sits to you, Mr. Borgiers. He also left you with a large sum of money and all the possessions on the property. I, of course, will happily remain to assist you with anything you need, should you choose to have me." Heath collapsed back into the chair he had been sitting in, a look of shock on his face. "Mark Appleton left me this place? Why? How did he know me?" "I suppose you do have a lot of questions. I'm afraid I only have a few answers. Mr. Appleton was a rather private man, even with me. He told me many things, but kept certain truths to himself. When he died, he left me a letter detailing what was to be done with his body and asking that I remain here until you arrived. I believe he was well acquainted with your parents before they passed away, and he felt a certain responsibility for that event. He spoke of Mr. and Mrs. Borgiers as if they were business partners, though he never went into great detail. From what I was able to glean over several conversations, your father was very involved with a bootlegging operation. He owned a bar in Mount Vernon, and Mr. Appleton was one of the primary investors. When those men showed up that night to kill your parents, he wasn't there to help, and I think that weighed on him." Hermes stopped speaking when he noticed a look of confusion on Heath's face. My parents died in a train collision. They weren't criminals." He could barely get the words out. The idea that his parents were anything other than upstanding citizens was causing his stomach to turn in knots. "Some may have considered them criminal, I suppose, but your parents did a lot of good for the community with the help of Mr. Appleton. The bar kept the money flowing and saved a lot of people during the Depression. After your parents died, Mr. Appleton made it his mission to keep the bar going, until he passed not long after. I sold the bar to Mr. Raven, per Mr. Appleton's instructions, when the time came." "How did Mark Appleton know James?" Heath asked. "Mr. Raven had been involved with an expedition funded by Mr. Appleton to retrieve a treasure in a dense jungle in Africa. That expedition was the 7th time Mr. Appleton had sent a team after the treasure and only succeeded thanks to Mr. Raven. After that, the two of them kept in touch until Mr. Appleton passed." "So, me meeting James was a complete setup? James knew who I was?" "Yes and no. Mr. Raven had been asked to look out for you, but he hadn't had a chance to do that before leaving on the expedition where you two met. He had no idea you would be there, so fate played a role. Fate has a hand in everything that happens, Mr. Borgiers. As much as Mr. Appleton tried to plan out all the details, he had no way of knowing the choices you would make along the journey." "What exactly did Mr. Appleton have in store for me? Reading that letter, it sounded like he had some kind of plan. It said I've been selected for something." Heath's voice quivered slightly. betraying the image he was trying to portray? That is a question I don't have an answer for. Mr. Appleton never confided his full intent in me. He said that you were destined for something and that you needed to be looked after for a time, but nothing else was mentioned. Heath sat stone-faced for several minutes, trying to wrap his mind around the situation. His parents had been murdered? James knew about him before they met? It felt like his whole life had been a big lie. It's getting dark. We really should be heading back, Samantha finally spoke, though she sounded unsure of what she was saying. I suggest you consider staying for the night. I can make you up a bed. You don't want to be outside on the property at night. Your car will be fine, and you can leave first thing in the morning if you would like, Hermes said. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. This whole thing, it's a lot. I need some time to process everything, Heath said, looking at Samantha, who was staring back at him in disbelief. Hermes nodded and left to prepare their sleeping arrangements. I don't like the idea of staying here overnight, Samantha said when he had disappeared. I don't either, but I think it might be for the best. When we were driving up earlier, I thought I saw something cross the road behind us, and I don't really want to find out what it was in the dark. I think our best bet is just to hunker down, try to rest, and leave at first light. I trust you. I'm just worried about what might happen. I'm not so sure our host has the best of intentions. For all we know, he bought the place after Mark died and is just toying with us, she said, sitting down in the chair next to Heath. He knows too much to just be some random guy. I don't know that I trust him either, but something about him seems familiar. When we first came up to the house, I had the same feeling. I think I've been here before, maybe as a kid, but I don't really remember it. There might be more answers in this house and I want to find them. After a few moments of silence, Hermes returned and showed them to their room. Bidding them a good night, he closed the door and disappeared again. The room was very well kept, with a large four-poster bed up against the back wall. Silk sheets adorned the mattress, and the pillows reminded Heath of clouds. A large wardrobe sat along the wall near the bed, its doors intricately carved with a design reminiscent of something that might adorn an ancient Greek temple. A vanity sitting in the corner caught the eye of Samantha, who had owned one similar to it when she was a young girl. Small bulbs around the mirror were shining dimly, welcoming whoever might be sitting there to see themselves in the best light possible. I guess if we're going to stay, I should grab a shower before bed. The warm water will help calm me down. I know for sure I won't get any rest unless I can relax, Samantha said as she walked toward the door leading to the private bathroom. All right, I might join you a bit. I want to look around a little first, though, he said, unable to hide his curiosity about what might be in the drawers. After she had disappeared, he began looking through every cabinet that he could open. At first, nothing really stood out. There were some old-looking clothes in one of the drawers, most likely belonging to Mark Appleton, as they were much too big for the old caretaker. Another space contained some tools and random junk, probably there as a temporary storage solution that had become permanent. As he was about to give up and join Samantha in the shower, one more drawer caught his eye. At first, it appeared to be empty as he pulled it open. A closer look, however, revealed a single book laying in the very back. Pulling the book out, Heath was impressed to find a leather cover with a strap holding it closed. Undoing the strap, he slowly pulled back the cover and discovered the pages inside were blank. As he flipped through, he couldn't help but think about how a journal like this shouldn't be sitting in the back of some drawer. Without a second thought, Heath set the book on the bedside table, deciding it would make a perfect journal when the one he was working on was filled. After a quick shower with Samantha, the two of them laid down for the night. It wasn't hard to get comfortable in the large bed, and Heath drifted off much quicker than he expected. Very quickly, he found himself dreaming an odd dream where he was sitting in a parking lot watching a man wander between the cars. The man looked over at him, seemingly frightened, and Heath ducked out of sight. Waking up, he realized that he was still in bed and it was still dark. Brushing it off as something in the tea, Heath closed his eyes again and fell back into a restful sleep. So that is chapter 17. Some new characters, a lot of new things coming and happening all at once. And it's about to really pick up. there's going to be a lot coming in the next couple of chapters, especially as we go back and forth between Heath and Josh, and there's going to be some explanations for things that I can't wait to share. So I want to know your thoughts, though, down in the comments of what you think is going to happen next and where you think the story is going before we get to the next chapters, right? But other than that, if you want to watch the next chapter, say you're watching this when it first comes out, you can watch the next one over on Patreon. Patreon, I release all of the chapters, everything that I recorded a week before. So, you can go check it out over on Patreon if you want to see it early. There's also some behind-the-scenes stuff, some extra information. I'm going to be doing some videos talking about the books themselves, that sort of thing. So, if that's something you're interested in, head over to Patreon and help support the channel as I continue to try to grow. Speaking of growth, subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, you probably should be by chapter 17, 18, like the video. Likes are always appreciated. It lets YouTube know that it's good to share it, and maybe they'll show it to more people. The algorithm is hard as it is, but, that's for another video. But I want to thank you all for watching. I'm going to finish my coffee here, and then, get on with the day. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.